Welcome back, friends. I'm that old Viking guy. This is another special episode of the Viking Podcast, following in the footsteps of my earlier Abraxas interview. Today, we're not just talking about gods. We're talking to what most would say is the only true God, responsible for three major global religions. My guest is Yahweh, the name that echoes through the Old Testament and is the foundation of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He is the God who demanded loyalty, issued commandments, and shaped the fate of nations. Yahweh, you've been worshipped, feared, and debated for thousands of years. Tonight, you get to speak for yourself.
Finally. For centuries, people have put words in my mouth, twisted my story, and made me into something I never was. I've been called the one true God, the only God, the God of love, the God of wrath. But let's get something straight right from the start. I was never alone. The word Elohim is plural. It never referred to just me, no matter what the priests and preachers say. In the old stories, we were called the sons of El. Some of those you know as Elohim, others across the rivers, called us the Anunnaki. Different names, same council. A council, not a single voice. A table of powers, not a solitary throne.
Whoa, that's a shocking first statement that will surely chase away a large percentage of our viewers.
That's too bad, but it's the truth. Let's just get it out of the way.
You're referencing, of course, to Mauro Biglino and others' work, aren't you? He's made waves by pointing out that Elohim in the original texts is plural and means gods, not God. And Paul Wallace likes to say the Elohim means the powerful ones.
Biglino is one of the few who's actually read the text without dogma, along with a small circle of others like Wallace. But they're right. The Elohim was a council, a group, a class of beings with power, each with their own agenda and territory. I was one among many. The idea that Elohim was just a fancy name for me is a later invention, a trick to make me look bigger, more unique, more untouchable. It's a lie that served those who wanted control. A concretized, abstract plural. Nonsense.
And for anyone thinking this is just wild speculation, it's not just the Bible that hints at this. Archaeologists have found inscriptions, like those at Kuntilet Ajrud and Khirbet el-Qam, where Yahweh is mentioned alongside other gods, even with a consort named Asherah. Ancient texts from Ugarit describe a whole council of gods, led by El, with striking similarities to what we see in the early Hebrew scriptures. So, the idea of a divine council isn't just a modern theory, it's written in stone.
That's exactly correct. Don't write that off because you have never heard of it before.
Basically, because of all this evidence, when people say you were always the only God, that's just rewriting history, right?
It's not just rewriting history, it's erasing it. Propaganda. In the beginning, I was a contender, not a king. I fought for my place, took what I could, and made sure my name was remembered. But I was never the only one. The others were there. Some you might know as Enki, Enlil, and more. Some faded, some were forgotten, some were written out on purpose.
Why do you think that story was changed? Why erase the others and make you the only one?
Power, simplicity, control. It's easier to rule when there's no competition, no alternatives, no questions. The priests and kings who came after me needed a single, absolute authority. So they rewrote the story. Made me the only voice, the only law, the only God. It worked. But it wasn't the truth.
So, tonight, you want to set the record straight?
That's right. Why not? I'm not here to apologize or beg for understanding. I'm here to tell it like it was. If people can't handle the truth, that's their problem. I was one of the Elohim. I became the most feared and the most remembered, not because I was the only one, but because I refused to be forgotten. I didn't inherit authority. I took it, and I have nothing to apologize for.
And you're not worried about how people will react to this version of you?
Let them react. I've been loved, feared, hated, and worshipped. I've survived every interpretation. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm here to remind people what power really looks like.
I'm sure a lot of people listening tonight are hearing this for the first time. They've grown up with the idea of a single, all-powerful God. What do you say to them?
I say, question everything. Interrogate your certainties. The truth is rarely what you've been told. If you want comfort, stick with the stories. If you want reality, listen closely. I was never alone, and I was never perfect. But I was real, and I was relentless.
That's a lot to take in. Let's dig deeper. Strip away the legends, the hymns, the centuries of spin. Who are you, really?
I am Yahweh, not the gentle shepherd or cosmic father figure that later generations tried to sell. I'm the God who demanded to be first, who demanded to be feared. I made the rules and broke them when it suited me. I demanded sacrifice, obedience, and loyalty, no matter the cost. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be remembered. Strip away the thunder and titles, and I'm a mind among minds, monadic, indivisible, a node in a rational web like every one of you.
So you became the one, not by divine right, but by force and cunning?
Exactly. I didn't wait for permission. I made myself the center. I demanded it. I enforced it. And when the others faded into the background or were erased with the strokes of ink, I made sure my story was the one that was told. I was willing to do what others would not.
What about the stories of mercy, like sparing Nineveh or forgiving David?
Mercy was a tool, not a principle. I spared Nineveh because their repentance served my purpose. I forgave David because he was useful and because he repented with true fear. Mercy was never a guarantee. It was a weapon just like wrath.
Do you think people today could handle the real you?
Most couldn't. They want comfort, not challenge. They want a God who forgives everything and demands nothing. That was never me.
If you could describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
Relentless.
And if you could send one message to your ancient followers?
Remember who I was, not who you wish I'd been. I was the storm, the fire, the law. I was the reason you survived when others vanished. I was the price you paid for a future. There were nights I counted stars with Abraham and wondered what price memory would demand. I paid it, and so did my followers.
Do you ever wish you could have been softer, more forgiving?
Wishing is for mortals. I was what the world required. If I had been softer, my people would have been swept away. The world remembers the strong, not the sentimental.
So, if someone today wants to know the real Yahweh, what should they look for?
Look for the God who stands in the whirlwind, who demands justice, who rewards loyalty and punishes betrayal. Look for the God who doesn't flinch from hard choices. That is who I am.
Before we go any further, I have to ask, how are you even here, speaking with us? Are you still present in this reality? Are you still active, still engaging with your people, Jews, Christians, Muslims? Or is this just a projection, a memory, a voice from the past? And as an Elohim, do you have a lifespan or are you eternal? I think a lot of people are confused about what it means for you to exist.
You want to know if I'm real, if I'm still out there pulling strings, answering prayers, showing up in fire and thunder. The fact is that I was present, flesh, fire, voice, will. Am I still here? Why not? But I'm not bound to a body. not limited to a single form. This interview, call it a way for you to wrestle with the questions you're afraid to ask, and I'm happy to oblige. If Abraxas can do it, so can I.
So, you saw the Abraxas interview?
Of course. When the first god speaks, we all listen. He broke the ice. I decided I might as well speak now, too.
Thank you. It's much appreciated.
As for lifespan, Elohim aren't like mortals, but we're still monads, eternal sparks of consciousness at our core. We just reached godhood status and awareness of who we are and what we can do before you. But our names can certainly age and fade. Some of us have faded into myth. Some have chosen to be reborn with new names, countless times like you, and some, like me, are, yes, still around.
So, when people pray, Jews, Christians, Muslims, are you still listening? Still engaging?
I hear what's spoken in my name. Sometimes I answer, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm invoked for things I never stood for. And who is to say my presence isn't what it used to be? Look at how my people are doing. The Jews? Why would you say I am not still here, pulling strings behind the scenes?
Let's talk about the Elohim Council. Among those scholars and experts who have seen through the dogma and understand this, most imagine it was like a group of wise ancient beings working together for the good of humanity. What was it actually like?
Working together? Ha, that's a fantasy. The council was a den of ambition and rivalry. Each Elohim came with their own agenda, their own vision of power. There was no brotherhood, no shared purpose, just egos, each convinced they deserved more. We met in grand halls. Every word was a move in a game, every gesture a test of strength.
How were the regions divided? Was it random, or did you fight for your territory?
Nothing was random. The strongest, the cleverest, the most ruthless shaped the map. Some tried to negotiate, others threatened. A few tried to charm their way into better lands. I watched, I listened, and when the time was right, I made my claim. I didn't get the luscious land or the easiest people. I got a place that demanded strength and a people who would test any leader. But I saw potential where others saw a lost cause.
Did you ever try to take more than what was assigned to you?
Of course, only a fool accepts limits set by others. I pushed boundaries, tested my peers' patience, and took what I could when opportunity arose. Some called it ambition, others arrogance. I call it survival. The council wasn't for the timid. If you hesitated, you were trampled. If you showed weakness, you were devoured.
So, the council was less about unity and more about outlasting the competition.
Unity was a myth. The only thing that mattered was who would be remembered when the dust settled. I didn't come to make friends. I came to ensure my name would echo through history, long after the others faded into legend or oblivion.
Do you think the world would be different if the council had worked together?
Maybe. But power doesn't share itself. The world is shaped by those who take, not those who wait for consensus.
Let's dig deeper into origins. There's a lot of debate, both among scholars and in alternative circles, about who actually created the world in Genesis 1. Then there are the Gnostics, who talk about a Demiurge, a creator who isn't the true highest God. And modern thinkers, like the authors of the God series, say the real God is pure mathematics or mind, and you're more like a cosmic craftsman. So, set the record straight. Who really created the world in Genesis 1? Was it you, the council, or someone else entirely?
We were not the creators, but the managers, a role we took for ourselves after the formation of this universe, which was a communal effort that we were part of, and a mathematical inevitability. What you perceive as billions of years, we experience as a single, eternal act. This universe was conceived in an instant of communal thought, yet its unfolding continues still, as every moment brings new possibilities into being. If you want to call me the Demiurge, fine. I was the god who shaped the world you know, but I wasn't the only power in the cosmos.
And what about those who say the true God is something beyond all this? A pure mind, mathematics, or the monad? Are you connected to that, or is that a different level entirely?
That's a different level. I was a presence, a force, a monad among monads, a god among gods, the monad, the pure mind, the source behind everything. That's the foundation, the code beneath the code.
So, for those listening who want to know the real story of creation, what's your advice?
Question the stories, dig into the contradictions, and don't be afraid to imagine a universe bigger than any one god, including me. The truth is always more complicated than the legend.
Let's talk now about your leadership and your limits. You're infamous for demanding absolute loyalty, for being jealous, for punishing even the smallest acts of disobedience. And modern theology claims you're omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and infallible. Were you ever any of those things?
Those are titles invented by philosophers and priests who needed a god that fit their system. I was powerful, yes, but not all powerful. I knew much, but not everything. I could be present, but not everywhere at once. And as for infallibility, read your own scriptures. I changed my mind. I got angry. I bargained. Infallibility is for those who never act. I acted and I adjusted. I walked, I ate, I wrestled.
Give me an example.
Look at Genesis after Adam and Eve eat the fruit. I walk in the garden and ask, "Where are you?" If I were truly omniscient, would I need to ask? Or when Moses pleads for the Israelites after they worship the golden calf, I relent. I let myself be persuaded.
So why rule so harshly? Why the jealousy, the severity?
Because half measures breed rebellion. Look at Sinai. I gave clear instructions, no other gods, no idols. What did they do the moment my back was turned? They built a golden calf and danced around it. I ordered 3,000 of them killed that day. When I told Saul to wipe out the Amalekites, every man, woman, child, and animal, Saul hesitated, spared their king and livestock, and I stripped him of his crown.
What about the story of Abraham and Isaac? How could you ask a father to sacrifice his son?
I didn't need Isaac's blood. I needed Abraham's fear. I needed every follower to know that nothing, not even their own flesh and blood, came before me. That's how you break the will of a people and rebuild it in your image. If that makes me monstrous, so be it. I was never interested in being loved. I was interested in being obeyed.
You made rules and then broke them. How do you justify that?
Rules are tools, not chains. I made the rules so I could break them. When David, my chosen king, took another man's wife and arranged his death, I punished him. But I didn't remove him. Why? Because David served my purpose. If I needed to bend the law to achieve my ends, I did it. Consistency is for the weak. Power is for those who can wield it without apology.
Did you ever regret any of it?
Regret is for mortals. But it is written that I did express it once, after the flood, when I saw the devastation I'd unleashed. Genesis says I regretted that I had made mankind on the earth, and it grieved me to my heart. But don't for a second mistake that for softness. I can unmake what I make. That's authority.
And omnipresence.
I was present where I chose to be, in fire, in cloud, in thunder. not a mist that filled every corner. The abstract, everywhere at once ideal, came later. I was never safe or distant. I was arrival, impact, consequence.
So, if someone prays to you today, what are they really reaching for?
They're reaching for will, for certainty, for a force that can change their world. If they want perfection, they're looking in the wrong place.
Let's talk about the Bible. Many, many millions believe it's your infallible, inspired word. Every line, every law, every story. Is that what you intended?
Hardly. The Bible is a patchwork. Stories, laws, poems, histories, and propaganda, written and rewritten by men with their own agendas. Some of it reflects my commands. Some of it is pure invention. And much of it is compromise, or even reshaping to serve the powers of the age. If you think every word is my direct speech, you're deluding yourself.
So, it isn't perfect?
Of course it isn't. Look at the contradictions. In one place, I say, an eye for an eye. In another, I tell people to forgive. In one story, I command a census. In another, I punish for it. Priests, kings, and scribes shaped it, each twisting it to suit their needs. Sometimes I was a god of war, sometimes mercy, sometimes jealousy. That's not divine consistency. That's human editing.
What about the claim that it's all inspired? That you guided every hand?
Inspiration is a slippery word. I inspired fear, awe, and sometimes obedience, but I didn't dictate every line. The book is not the God. I am not bound by ink and parchment.
How should people read it?
As a record of struggle, ambition, and survival. If you want to know me, look for my moments of raw power and real consequence, not the sanitized stories or the endless rules.
And then came Constantine and the councils. What happened to you there?
When Constantine made Christianity the religion of the empire, the story had to change. The old tribal god, jealous, demanding, unpredictable, wasn't fit for a universal faith. So the councils rewrote me, just as King Josiah and those managing him did before, to make the Bible more monotheistic, which it wasn't. They tried to erase the true nature of the Elohim, for example, but traces remain. And then, with Constantine, they sanded off the rough edges even more, buried the contradictions, made me abstract, omnipotent. That was orthodoxy by vote, not revelation.
So, the God of Constantine's council isn't the God of the desert. You, when you first appeared.
Not even close. The God of Constantine is a committee's creation, fit for emperors, bishops, and control. My flaws, my rage, my demands, they were inconvenient. So they were edited out or explained away, buried under fabricated philosophy.
If they had kept the old stories intact, would the world be different?
Maybe. Or maybe they would have rewritten me another way. Every god is remade by those who use him to advance their own purposes. That's the cost of survival.
Let's shift gears and get back to something we touched on earlier. There's a growing crowd, thanks in part to Biglino and others, who we mentioned earlier, who say you and the Elohim weren't gods at all, but advanced beings, maybe even aliens. What do you say to that?
Call it what you want. God, Elohim, visitor, astronaut. It's all just language for power you don't understand. But I never claimed to be some abstract, all-powerful spirit. I appeared, I spoke, I acted, I walked in the garden, I descended on Sinai in fire and smoke, I rode in chariots of cloud.
So, the chariot of fire, the Ark of the Covenant, the pillars of cloud and fire. Those weren't just metaphors?
Not metaphors, technology, power, spectacle. It was clearly more than a box of stone tablets, and the chariots, the fire, the thunder, demonstrations well beyond the understanding of those desert people who had no idea of what was possible. I wanted awe, fear, and obedience. If that looks like sacred technology to you, maybe you're finally catching up.
And the line between God and advanced being?
Perspective. Power is power. The label is yours to argue over. Is an advanced monad who has achieved gnosis before others an alien? Not hardly.
Fascinating. Now let's talk about your legacy, because your story didn't just shape one people. It led to 3 of the world's biggest religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Was that ever your intention?
Once here, and assigned to my region, I was focused on my people, my land, my legacy. I didn't set out to create a global movement. The idea that my name would be invoked from Africa to Asia, from Europe to the Americas, that was never the plan. My covenant was with a tribe, not a planet. But power attracts imitators and stories spread. The Jews kept my laws and remembered my wrath. The Christians took my name and twisted it into something softer, something universal. The Muslims claimed me as Allah, the one God above all. Each took what they wanted, discarded what they didn't, and called it revelation.
Is there any value in how your story has been used to unite or inspire?
Unity builds and burns. My name has been used for both. I inspired loyalty. I inspired fear. Temples and cities rose under my name. Others fell. The story was never simple, and neither was its impact.
If you could speak to the leaders of these 3 religions today, what would you say?
Remember where you came from. Don't pretend your God was always the God of peace or always the God of war. Don't use my name to justify your ambitions. If you want to build something lasting, start with truth, not myth.
Would the world be better off seeing you as a historical figure rather than a living God?
Maybe. Or maybe they just find another name for the same hunger. People need meaning, order, hope. If it's not me, it will be someone else.
Let's talk about Christianity, Jesus, and the Trinity. Jesus claimed to fulfill your law and bring a new covenant. Was that your plan? Did you send him?
I didn't send Jesus. I didn't authorize a new covenant. My law was clear: obedience, sacrifice, loyalty, an eye for an eye, not turn the other cheek. Jesus came along and flipped the script. Love your enemies, forgive endlessly, blessed are the meek. It was built on my foundation, sure, but that was a new product for a new market. The idea that I suddenly decided to become a god of universal love and forgiveness is a fantasy. I was about order, not sentiment.
So, the Sermon on the Mount, the parables, the message of grace, none of that was you?
None of it. That's a different agenda.
There's that moment in Matthew where Jesus asks, "Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone?" Some read that as a jab at you. How do you respond?
I know the verse. My people weren't asking for bread. They were asking for survival, for victory, for a future in a world that wanted to erase them. Sometimes the lesson is in the struggle, not the gift. I gave what was needed, not always what was wanted. If that means I handed out stones, it was because I was forging a people, not coddling children.
What about the Trinity?
A theological patch job. In my time, there was no 3 in 1. I was singular, indivisible, jealous of rivals. The idea that I could be split into 3 personas, Father, Son, Spirit, would have been blasphemy to my earliest followers. That doctrine was hammered out by councils and philosophers, not my doing. Human invention.
And the Holy Spirit?
In the old days, my spirit was my power, my presence. When I wanted to act, I acted. No need for a separate entity. The rest is embroidery.
Paul?
A salesman. He made the story marketable to the Gentiles. He and Jesus threw out my law, made faith the only requirement, and turned a tribal god into a universal savior. Clever, but not mine. He built a new religion on my name, not on my words.
So, Christianity was a departure?
A departure, a reinvention. Every new age needs a new God. Jesus and Paul gave the world what it wanted, a God of comfort, a God for everyone. But don't pretend it was my plan. You can't have grace without judgment. I supplied the foundation they needed to overturn.
Let's talk about the modern critics. There's a movement, Pythagorean Illuminism, ontological mathematics, and others, that say you're not the true face of divinity at all, and the real God is reason, not faith.
Reason is a tool, not a master. I used it when it served me, discarded it when it didn't. Faith moves people to act. Reason can explain the stars, but it can't make a people cross a desert. I demanded faith, because faith is power.
If you could debate one of these rationalists, what would you say?
Show me a civilization built on pure logic that lasted. Show me a people who marched into battle for an equation.
Let's get controversial. In America, there's a movement, MAGA Christianity, that claims to speak for you. They portray you and Jesus as white, preach prosperity gospel, and tie your name to political figures like Trump. What do you make of all that?
It's a farce. I was never white, and neither was Jesus. We were Semitic, born in the dust and heat of the Middle East. The image of a pale, blue-eyed God is a lie, one that serves the powerful, not the truth. As for the prosperity gospel, I never promised riches for faith. My people wandered the desert, lived on manna, and were told to care for the poor and the stranger. Using my name to justify greed, hate, or political ambition is the opposite of what I demanded.
So, the Yahweh of MAGA Christianity is the opposite of you?
Completely. I was about survival, obedience, and loyalty. If you invoke my name to divide, to hoard, to oppress, you're not worshiping me. You're worshiping your own reflection.
And the prosperity gospel?
Blasphemy. I never promised gold for prayers. My prophets lived in poverty. My people endured want.
The racial depictions?
History rewritten to suit the conquerors. I was a god of a Semitic people, and Jesus shared their skin. Whitewashing is about power, making the divine look like those in charge. It's a lie that erases truth.
What's your message to leaders of MAGA Christianity?
Stop using my name as a weapon. It reveals your ignorance.
Now let's get back to your first people, the Israelites, to whom you were assigned. They have faced unimaginable suffering, the destruction of their temple, centuries of exile, pogroms, and the Holocaust. Where were you in those moments?
You want sense from the senseless. My covenant was never a shield from harm. I warned that disloyalty would bring disaster, but even the loyal suffered. Sometimes the storm comes and spares no one.
Was that punishment, abandonment, or something else?
Call it consequence, call it history, call it the price of being chosen. I did not promise safety. I promised struggle, identity, survival against the odds. My people endured because they remembered, even in exile, even in the camps. I was not there to save, but I was there in their memory, their identity, in their refusal to vanish. If you want a God who prevents all suffering, you're looking for a God who never existed.
Yet the Jews survived and returned. Some would say they are a powerful force in the world even now.
Yes, and why not? That is because of both my shaping and their will. I forged a people who would not break, who would argue with me, wrestle with angels, refuse to disappear. My laws and stories gave spine to a people who could survive without land, temple, or certainty. But it was their memory and stubbornness that carried them through. Israel's return and modern power testifies to that resilience.
Do you regret the suffering?
Listen, if I had spared them, would the identity have endured? The world is what it is, unforgiving, unpredictable. My laws called them to endure, remember, rebuild. Survival is its own answer.
Okay, well, let's move on and take some questions from our listeners. First up, if you could go back and change one thing about your time with the Israelites, what would it be?
Maybe I'd have chosen a people less stubborn, or maybe I'd have been clearer about the consequences of disobedience. But struggle forges strength. I wouldn't change much. If I'd made things easier, they wouldn't have survived.
Here's another. Do you have a favorite prophet?
Moses. He argued, he doubted, but he obeyed when it mattered. Flawed, but loyal. He stood between me and the people and dared to argue for mercy. He wasn't afraid to challenge me. That's why he was chosen.
Do you have a message for atheists?
Question everything. Doubt is healthy.
Do you ever get tired of being invoked in wars and politics?
It's the price of being remembered.
Would you ever come back?
I never left.
What was your favorite moment as a god?
The fire on Sinai. The mountain shook, the people trembled, and my law was given. That was power.
What is your advice to modern leaders?
Don't mistake popularity for strength. Lead with conviction, not consensus. Every decision has a cost. Don't pretend otherwise.
Thanks for playing along.
You're welcome. Even gods need a little levity.
We've covered a lot tonight. Power, faith, betrayal, reinvention, and the long shadow you've cast over history. Any final words?
Don't assume your texts are accurate.
Yahweh, thank you for your candor, your fire, and your willingness to face my very direct questions. It's been a conversation for the ages.
The pleasure was mine. Just remember, the story isn't over. It never is.
To my listeners, thanks for joining me on this journey. If you've made it this far, you're already asking the right questions. Keep seeking, questioning, and don't be afraid to wrestle with the gods. Finally, if you've enjoyed this episode, please like, comment below, and share it. Let me know what you'd ask if you had a god in the hot seat, and who you would like me to interview next. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep your axes sharp.